So I was merrily perusing the online space like most of us happily do, until I bumped into a post that said something along the lines of this. Like, kids need to learn how to read a history book. They never did this for us when we were in school. We are teachers, now performers, or entertainers. Well. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Game Plan Educational Solutions. I'm Cecilia Temes, and I've been an educator for the past decade. In that time, I've been able to transform my teaching from just being a job to a calling. Now, I travel and work with campuses and colleagues that are looking to become influential, effective, and engaging educators. Comment below if you ever heard that from your teacher. The truth is, there is a huge difference between educating and edutaining. In today's video, we're going to be talking about being engaging without feeling like an entertainer, or as we throw around in the education world, without being an edutainer. If you're interested in learning some student engagement strategies and activities that you can quickly and easily implement into your classroom without feeling like you're putting on a dog and pony show, then make sure you stick around until the end of the video, because I am dropping all the juicy details. Without further ado, let's jump right in. So the first thing you might be wondering is, okay, how do I know if I'm actually just edutaining versus actually being an engaging teacher? Now, there are some sure tell signs to know if you're not learning a darn thing. So here are the top signs for you to be able to tell that difference. So the first thing is that your game or your activity is way more focused on the details or on the premise of the game, and actually the content, actually I should say the learning outcome that your students are expected to know or review by the end of the game. So if it's more focused on the storyline, if it's more focused on the premise of the actual game, then you're wasting your time and your students will really not get much out of this game. Let me give you an example. Like my third year teaching, I don't know what it was, but zombie movies were everywhere. And so of course, naturally, being the smarty little teacher that I was like, ooh, I'll make a review game where we have zombies in it. And I made this whole storyline and it was fantastic. I sketched on the whiteboard all these drawings, but unfortunately the next day my students didn't remember diddly squat, because all they remembered was like the zombies and like the game rules and nothing to do with the content. So epic fail. The second way to know if your game is just more entertaining than actually engaging is if it's just overcomplicated. If there are so many game rules and like levels and whatever, it's gonna like fly over your students' heads. They're not learning the content, they are learning the game, my friends. The third way to know if you're merely entertaining versus engaging is your questions or your activity is not intentionally planned or aligned to your content, to your standards, to your learning outcome. If you sat down and you planned that game to where you could embed your learning content and the learning outcomes and what content you wanted to loop and review with your students or vocabulary, then we're getting somewhere, because you intentionally planned for that game to have a certain outcome. If you're just like, well, let me just do trivia questions on the fly. Now, quick disclaimer, for a more seasoned teacher, this is possible. But if you actually sit and at least plot what kind of questions, what depth of knowledge questions you need to ask, because that's going to be reflected on assessments or their end of the course project or whatever, then you know you're being very intentional. And when you're intentional, when you plan, you're basically setting up for your lesson to not be a complete waste of time. So the way you plan is the way that that game or activity or assessment will perform or will do with your class. And finally, if your students are not performing on tests, they're not performing on projects, or they simply don't remember the content when you ask them the next day, which, truth be told, is the most frustrating thing that could ever happen to a teacher, then you know your engaging, entertaining activity was just a total flop, and that we need to be more intentional when we create these activities. So let's talk about how we can flip this and actually use these engaging activities or games to our advantage, so they're intentional, so they're purposeful, so they actually work with our students' natural ability to retain information, and so that we don't feel like it's just entertainment. So let's check out some easy ways that you can engage your students and literally prime the runway here so that your students are actually concentrated and focused on the content versus just like the fun factor of an activity. So the first thing you need to do before you do anything else is have a relationship with your class. And if you don't have one, I would get on creating one like stat, because if your students don't feel liked, if you don't like your class, chances are no one's going to have very much fun. The vibe in your class from your students is just going to be like apathetic, like, why do we want to do this? And when you do try to put in the time and energy and effort, they're going to look at you with so much skepticism, like it's just not going to work out. So before you do anything and before you decide you're going to go full force and like make the class the most bomb diggity class they've ever had, you want to make sure that the relationship with your students is on fleek. So that's the first thing. The second thing you want to do is you need to hook your students and get them sold on whatever activity, project, assignment, whatever it is that you're going to be doing, lesson, topic. You need to hook your students. And again, it's all in the packaging. If you tell them, all right, guys, in this lesson, we're going to be analyzing some primary sources, you're going to kill their vibe, even their enthusiasm, even if you have a good relationship with them. Some teachers might think like, oh, well, gosh, talk about putting an extra workload on me. But the truth is, it's totally worth the investment. People do this for us as well as adults. So if it has to be done, if we have to be primed as an audience to purchase something or to go watch a certain movie or to buy into an idea, then naturally we need to do it for our younger humans as well, our students. So you are going to ultimately have to prime your audience or sell them on the idea and package that sucker good. I do have a video. If you're a subscriber to this channel, there is a video that I have about how you can hook your students on your lesson, and I'll go ahead and link that here and down below as well, so you can check that out once you're done watching this video. And I do also have another video that can help you create a good relationship with your class and teach the class in a more interesting way. And again, I'll link that up above and down below. But again, the way we do this is by appealing to your students' interests. So how are you going to sell the lesson? If your lesson incorporates their personal interests, they're probably going to be into it, or something's going to spark their interest. Another way to hook your class or sell the lesson is you want to tell a story. Psychologically, they're going to create a higher retention factor for your audience, which means that when you start your class with an engaging story that actually has elements that they can remember, sensory elements, that's touch, sight, taste, and sound, your class is more likely to remember that because they'll have an emotional connection or reaction to the story that you are sharing with them. Bringing speakers. So even if it's virtually, if you bring a guest speaker that's going to prime your audience, that's a great way to sell a lesson. You can also share visual. Videos are a great visual to show your students. And in my experience, a lot of my students actually prefer videos. But again, this goes back to just knowing your class and what they react to and what they get into. And also, I'm not talking about documentaries, okay? Documentaries, snooze fest, unless the documentary is dang good. So the purpose of these strategies is essentially to help you engage your learners and keeping the focus on your content. So more on education, less on entertainment. Now, if you're actually interested in learning about how to construct a learning game that's purposeful, that is intentional, make sure you check out my video on learning games and how you can create one of your own, and what elements are required to make a game actually work for a class. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you're interested in learning more about lessons that will engage your learners without having them lose focus on content, make sure you follow us on all social media platforms, which are linked below. Make sure you sign up for the Game Plan Educational Solution newsletter, in which I share tips and free resources that you can utilize in your classroom to engage and deliver effective lessons in your history class. As always, I wish you a fantastic day. Until next time, class dismissed.